You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Our sponsor, Collide, has some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet up to 100% compliance. How? If a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they fix the problem. It's that simple. Without Collide, IT struggles to solve basic problems, like ensuring everyone's OS and browser are up to date. Unsecure devices log into your company's apps with no problems because there's nothing there to stop them. But Collide works seamlessly with Okta to enforce compliance as part of authentication and complete the zero-trust security puzzle. Visit collide.com/CyberWire Daily to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/CyberWire Daily.
Hiatus Rat exploits business-grade routers. International law enforcement action against the DoppelPaymer gang. Ransomware hits a Barcelona hospital. Productivity suites are increasingly attractive as phishing grounds. Transparent tribes romance scams. Cyberattacks briefly disrupt Russian websites and media outlets. Ashley Leonard, CEO of 6 Sense, sits down with Dave Bittner to discuss their Advancing Zero Trust Priorities report. Joe Kerrigan on a warning from Microsoft about a surge in token theft. And trolling for disinformation raw material. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Trey Hester, filling in for Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. Lumen's Black Lotus Lab report identifies a campaign they're calling Hiatus, which they characterize as a complex, never-before-seen campaign which has been targeting business-grade routers since June of 2022. The malware converts compromised devices into covert proxies. Black Lotus says, quote, "The packet capture binary enables the actor to monitor router traffic on ports associated with email and file transfer communications." End quote. Most of the victims so far have been identified in Europe and Latin America, and the researchers, seeing no significant overlap with other threat activities, see Hiatus Rat as a unique cluster. It constitutes both a staging mechanism for subsequent attacks and threat to information transiting affected routers. Bleeping Computer reports that 2 alleged members of the DoppelPaymer group were targeted in a joint effort between German and Ukraine law enforcement. Europol, the FBI, and Dutch police also saw involvement. Europol said in a press release that officers in Germany on February 28th raided the house of a German national who is believed to have played a major role in the DoppelPaymer ransomware group. Ukrainian police, despite the ongoing war with Russia, were able to interrogate an alleged member of the gang apprehended in Ukraine. Law enforcement is actively seeking out 3 more actors that they believe were the core members of the gang. 11 suspects altogether have been identified. A ransomware attack against the hospital clinic of Barcelona on Sunday has severely disrupted the clinic's computer operations, as well as forcing cancellations of 150 non-urgent operations and as many as 3,000 patient checkups, the AP reported yesterday. The attack has been attributed to the Ransom House Gang, a group working from the outskirts of Spain. SecurityWeek wrote that Sunday's attack on the center crippled computer systems at the facilities, laboratories, emergency room, and pharmacy at 3 main centers and several external clinics. Thus, its effects weren't confined to a single location. Approximately 150 elective surgeries, 500 extractions, and around 300 consultations were unscheduled, according to Euroweekly News. Urgent cases are being redirected to other locations. Hospital Director Anthony Castells said in a Monday news conference, quote, "We can't make any predictions as to when the system will be back up to normal. Recovery is in process." End quote. Vade has published its annual Fisher's Favorites report for 2022, finding that Facebook, Microsoft, and Google were the most impersonated brands last year. Notably, Google, which placed 28th in 2021, jumped to the 3rd most impersonated brand last year, following a 1,560% increase in Google-themed phishing pages. The researchers attributed this increase to the growing popularity of Google Workspace, and Vade predicts that Microsoft and Google will be the two most widely impersonated brands in 2023 due to the prevalence of their productivity suites. Vade also observed significant increases in phishing attacks across nearly every industry sector. Virtual swallows and digital ravens are seeking to enmesh targets using bogus romantic come-ons. ESET reported this morning that Transparent Tribe, a group believed to operate from Pakistan, is active and apparently targeting, for the most part, Indian and Pakistani military and government officials with romance scams. The victims are convinced to download compromised versions of secure messaging apps to their Android phones. These apps will install the CapraRat backdoor, which is designed to exfiltrate information. ESET believes the attackers begin by contacting their victims via an email address or phone number and then luring them into a romance scam. After the victims have downloaded the Trojanized messaging app, the attackers continue communications with them over the messaging app while stealing information in the background. The malicious apps used poor operational security, and the researchers were able to locate over 150 victims. Most of Transparent Tribe's efforts may have gone into India and Pakistan, but infestations were also found in Egypt, Russia, and Oman. Anonymous claims to have resumed hacktivist actions against Russia, saying last Thursday that they were, quote, currently involved in operations against the Russian Federation, end quote. The Daily Beast reports that the Russian government site Kremlin.ru and 5 other government sites were down briefly on Monday. Kremlin.ru is back up now. The action appears to have been the now customary nuance-level hacktivist work of distributed denial of service and website defacements. Meanwhile, TASS is authorized to disclose that a member of Russia's delegation to the United Nations has denounced what she characterizes as the West's use of Ukraine as a testing ground for cyber warfare. Proofpoint this morning described an ongoing campaign by a Russian-aligned threat actor, TA499, also known as Vovin or Lexus, to engage Western political and business leaders in voice or video calls. The calls are recorded, and they appear designed to gather raw material that can be used to produce content that would tend to discredit those who have publicly supported Ukraine. Proofpoint summarizes, quote, the calls are almost always certainly a pro-Russia propaganda effort designed to create negative political content about those who have spoken out against Russian President Vladimir Putin and, in the last year, opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. End quote. Proofpoint goes on to add that if you rashly decide to take one of these calls, quote, TA499 is not a threat to take lightly due to the damage such propaganda could have on the brand and public perception of those targeted, as well as the perpetuation of disinformation. End quote. Engagement begins with emails inviting the target to join a call. The emails commonly impersonate a Ukrainian ambassador. Should the target agree to the call, TA499 will use a video deepfake to impersonate a trusted interlocutor. Once the target is induced to make a statement in the Ukrainian interest, the threat actor engages in what Proofpoint calls antics, designed to fluster the target into doing or saying something embarrassing. That embarrassment will then display elsewhere in the interest of the Kremlin. Coming up after the break, Dave Bittner sits down with Ashley Leonard of 6 Sense to discuss their Advancing Zero Trust Priorities report, and Joe Kerrigan on a warning from Microsoft about a surge in token theft. Stick around.
Do any of these scenarios sound familiar? Your C-suite was targeted by cyber criminals who used their family's personal data to get to them. A public-facing employee's home address was exposed online by an angry activist. An individual contributor's personal email address and mobile number were used by threat actors to socially engineer their way into your enterprise systems. Human-powered cyber risk is growing exponentially, and weaponized personal data is a key, yet overlooked, risk factor. DeleteMe's business solution actively monitors for and removes employee personal information, such as name, family, home address, and cell phone number from the internet, making it easy to take proactive measures to protect both your employees and your organization. Visit joindeleteme.com/cyberwire to learn more. That's joindeleteme.com/cyberwire. Struggling to keep up with the demands of managing and securing identity in your distributed enterprise IT environment? You're not alone, but don't let it hold you back. With Strata's identity orchestration platform, you can secure all your apps on any cloud with any IDP, so your IT teams will never have to refactor for identity again. Imagine modernizing app identity in minutes instead of months, deploying passwordless on any tricky old app, and achieving business resilience with always-on identity, all from one lightweight and flexible platform. Want to see it in action? Share your identity challenge with Strata on a discovery call, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. So don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Ashley Leonard is CEO and co-founder of endpoint security firm 6 Sense. They recently shared a report titled Advancing Zero Trust Priorities. For details on what they found, I spoke with Ashley Leonard.
First of all, the fact that the amount of organizations that are currently evaluating zero trust is pretty interesting. Our results showed that 62% of organizations are currently evaluating or have implemented a zero trust solution. The amount that actually have implemented it so far, though, are pretty small. It's only 4.8% of organizations that have actually currently implemented some form of zero trust implementation.
And why do you suppose that's lagging in that way? I mean, as you say, this is certainly a hot topic these days. That's a smaller number than I would have expected.
Yeah, it surprised me because you do see it so prevalent in the industry news and at trade shows. And I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of complexity around zero trust and a lot of problems actually understanding really what zero trust is. Many organizations think that you can just buy a product and you install the zero trust product and that will allow you to then have zero trust. And zero trust is really a lot more than that. It's more of a mindset. Certainly products help, and obviously we're a product vendor or a software vendor, so we can help you along that path, but it's a lot more than just buying a product to implement a true zero trust methodology.
What are your recommendations then? I mean, for folks who have their eye on going down this path, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, if you kind of look at traditional security worked with more of kind of, I like to call it the castle mentality, where you're going to have very high walls and a moat and very limited gates that you can enter the building through. And that kind of protected your organization in the old days. Now, nowadays, of course, those walls have come down. A great example is what recently happened with COVID and employees at home, and now those laptops and devices that were once at home are now walking in through the gates of the castle, get plugged into the corporate network, and now you have a problem. So you kind of have to, first of all, I think, change the mentality of the way that you look at cybersecurity in your organization, from being kind of that castle mentality to being a zero trust mentality, which is that you kind of have to have the mindset that everything is already breached, and that you want, what your job is to limit the damage that could happen from a device that is already potentially breached in the organization. So you kind of start there with that mindset change. What you then do is go ahead and need to perform an audit. And you cannot want to order a lot of different things. You want to think about the tools that you're currently using. And that's an important point because many organizations today are not actually at step one when it comes to implementing zero trust. They've often got tools that can already be used to help them along their zero trust route. Think about the assets that you have. Think about the data, the networks, how they're accessed, how they're secured. So you kind of want to do this audit of your IT infrastructure and then determine your risks. And that's also a different approach, I think, when it comes to zero trust, where traditional security, you typically look at an outside-in approach to security. you're kind of looking at how an attacker might get into your organization. With zero trust, you start on the inside, looking outwards. So you kind of have to change the way you look at your entire infrastructure. And then you implement the controls and requirements that will tighten the security to limit access, assuming that everything is untrusted until it's proved to be trusted. Finally, you repeat because it's constantly changing. That's I think the other key learning is that this is an iterative process, and you need to just run through the process and get to the end and start again. Because new software is coming in, new ways of accessing data, new data itself, new forms of storing data. So it's a constantly iterative process as you implement zero trust policies.
You know, there's that old saying that you shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm curious, do you think that applies to people who are in the midst of their zero trust journey?
Yeah, and I don't think there is going to be perfect. Typically, the smartest way to implement zero trust is to start with kind of the easy wins, and then you get to the end and then start again, and you move up to the next challenge. So it's I wouldn't wait. There's not going to be a perfect plan for implementing zero trust. The best thing to do is to get going and just keep iterating.
What's your message to the folks who are putting off this transition, who are kicking that can down the road, maybe intimidated by the notion of the change itself or for other reasons? What do you have to say to them?
Well, that's an interesting one as well. So as part of the survey, we actually asked that question. So we asked the question, why, if you're not looking at implementing zero trust, why? And the kind of top three answers that came back were lack of budget was number one. 41% of the respondents that are not implementing zero trust at the moment came back and said the primary reason was lack of budget and funding for a zero trust implementation. So they wanted to do it, but they couldn't. So I would say to that group, hey, this is not something you can put off. The old security approach of the castle walls doesn't work anymore. Behind that was technical challenges. And yes, there are challenges, but there's also an opportunity to learn new skills and improve your skills as an individual if you're implementing zero trust and help improve the business's overall security posture. And I would say that your level of security compliance and posture actually is a business benefit for your organization. We're in the security business and we have to prove compliance for many of the customers that we do business with. So it's an advantage the more highly secure we are, and it ends up being a differentiator for us versus some of our competitors. And then finally, I would say that the third item that came back from our survey regarding why customers don't implement zero trust was just a lack of direction from the top. So it's important, depending on the size of your organization, whether it's your CIO, CISO, or CEO, that you're aware of these types of initiatives like zero trust and you're making it a priority for your organization to implement.
That's Ashley Leonard from 6 Sense. The report is titled Advancing Zero Trust Priorities. And joining me once again is Joe Kerrigan. He is from Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, and also my co-host over on the Hacking Humans podcast. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
So, interesting story here from the folks over at eSecurity Planet. This is an article written by Jeff Goldman, and it's titled Microsoft Warns of Surge in Token Theft, Bypassing MFA. Can you unpack what's going on here, Joe?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on with the surge. That's I guess that Microsoft has a team called Detection and Response Team.
Yeah.
Or they like to call it DART because they also have a cool acronyms department over at Microsoft.
Right.
But they are noticing that there is an increase in these what's called token theft. They're describing two different kinds of token theft in here. One is called the adversary in the middle, and the other is called pass the cookie.
Okay.
So before we get into that, we should understand what a token is.
Yeah.
When you log into a website or a service or something, whatever it is, it's easier to understand with the web. So the web is stateless in that it doesn't the state doesn't survive from one connection to the next. So in that connection, your web browser will maintain something called in that connection. I say with quotes because it's actually mimicking a connection. Your web browser will maintain in a set of cookies, and that's why we have cookies. Something called a session token that verifies to the server that you are logged in correctly and you are who you say they are.
I see.
You say you are. So basically, what that means is every time you go to request something, if you have one of these tokens, you don't have to provide your username and password. So imagine life without the tokens. And I want to submit this form, and the thing says log in. So I go and have to log in. And then it says, okay, and then I want to click to the next page. I have to log in again. That would be miserable, right? It would be unusable. And not only that, but how would you even, there's a whole bunch of different questions that arise. So we just use these tokens as a representation of our session that really doesn't exist between one request and the next one.
Okay.
And we kind of build like a human understanding of a session. I'm logged in and then I'm logged out. Okay. And there's also other services where you log in, like let's say, for example, remote desktop protocol. Yeah. Where I don't know if that one has a token or not, but I would imagine it does. That there's some token in there that lets me authenticate over time. So what's happening here is they're talking about two different attacks. One is a pretty simple attack to understand. It's called pass the cookie. Okay. So it involves compromising a user's browser somehow. You see this happening a lot with plugins or with HTML. If it can break out, there's a vulnerability that nobody knows about, or you're using an unpatched version of your web browser. Somebody might be able to get access to the cookies that are stored for a site. And if they can get access to them, then it's really simple to then just to export them to somebody else. And then they can put that cookie into their web browser just by using some of the development tools that are included with these web browsers to then represent that they are you. And the server, if the server is not configured to look for things like, hey, this IP address is changed significantly. This person is now looking like they're coming out of New York City when just 2 minutes ago they looked like they were coming out of California. Okay. Right. Now, that actually may be a valid use case, but I think it's reasonable to, when you see that, to say, okay, you're just going to have to authenticate again. Right. And log back in. Yeah. So those kind of attacks are out there. The other one is called the attacker in the middle or adversary in the middle attack, which is kind of like a man in the middle, but it's basically what they do is they build malicious infrastructure that then lets you connect and log in and shows you what you should be connecting to and logging into. But when they receive the tokens, they make a copy of them. And then they steal them and they can log in with whatever service it was. This will bypass a lot of the multi-factor authentication protocols out there, like the SMS code or any of the codes that you have to enter, because you'll be looking at the actual web page when this thing loads, and when you have to enter a code that's either texted to you or generated by a program or a little piece of hardware that you have, there's nothing in that process that says you're not on the right web page, right? You're not looking at who you think you're looking at, or you're not using the correct service, or there's somebody in the middle that's being malicious. One of the things that Microsoft recommends here is using a FIDO Alliance authentication method, because that will protect against this. Because the FIDO device will only respond using the connection information for the people asking, or for the service asking for the authentication, which will not be the legitimate service behind the attacker in the middle, the malicious infrastructure. I see. So when it goes to what it does, and my reading is old on this, and I haven't read this up. I'm doing this all from memory. But what it does is it uses that server name, that URL or whatever it is, as a part of a private key along with a secret that it generates on the fly. Okay. And then it does a challenge response using that private key. Well, if Microsoft is saying, hey, I'm Microsoft, take Microsoft and your secret and add them together and give me the challenge response for this number, and then Bob's Evil Infrastructure says, hey, I'm Bob's Evil Infrastructure, give me the challenge response, your challenge response is not going to be correct for Microsoft. It's going to be correct for Bob's Evil Infrastructure.
I see.
And Microsoft will go, no, you didn't authenticate. So that's how, and that's a terrible way to explain how FIDO protects you against that. But suffice it to say, a FIDO key like a YubiKey or a Google Titan will protect you against this kind of attack.
All right.
But it will not protect you against logging in and having somebody exfiltrate your keys from your web browser.
Yeah.
So if you log into Google, put your Google Titan in there, push the button, and get the session key, and somebody steals that, if Google's not checking for that kind of thing, which they might be, I don't know, then they have stolen your session, and they can do whatever they want as you.
All right.
Now, unfortunately, Google, whenever you need to do anything significant, they do ask for your password again.
Yeah.
But these guys don't even need to know your password, username, password, or your multi-factor authentication stuff. They just need to get the session.
All right. Well, once again, this is over on eSecurity Planet, article by Jeff Goldman. Microsoft warns of surge in token theft bypassing MFA. Joe Kerrigan, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is me, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show is written by John Petrick, our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Trey Hester, filling in for Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Dreamport is a mission accelerator that combines state-of-the-art facilities, innovative programs, and imaginative people charged with finding that spark that leads to unparalleled capability. Headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, Dreamport was created through a partnership intermediary agreement with U.S. Cybercom, awarded to Missy in May 2018. For more information, please visit dreamport.tech.